Hey everyone. Welcome to Reddit Junkie. Today's video is on Chauvin guilty on all charges. What are your thoughts? Genuinely honest legal question here. How do you get charged for second and third degree murder and manslaughter? I always thought since they're all different levels you'd pick the one that applies. Basically my question is, why is manslaughter even there when second degree is much worse anyway, and why still use all three and convict on all three? Here's my response to another asking the same question. 2020 Minnesota Statute 609.19, Subdivision 2, Clause 1. Chauvin was convicted of causing Floyd to death while committing felony assault, constituting second-degree murder in Minnesota. Likewise, third-degree murder in Minnesota is stipulated when death follows an act eminently dangerous to others and evincing a depraved mind, without regard for human life. 2020 Minnesota Statute 609.205, Clause 1. Chauvin was convicted of causing Floyd's death via culpable negligence, creating an unreasonable risk, and consciously chances causing death or great bodily harm to another, constituting second-degree manslaughter in Minnesota. Nothing says that these charges are mutually exclusive, and one can see that the statutes overlap in their applicability to Floyd's death. I presume the overlapping is acknowledged by applying concurrent sentences, rather than cumulative ones. Thank you for an actual answer based on statute. I see. So since the situation met criteria for multiple levels, they charged for all of them. I was under the impression for murder it was just pick the highest one you can. But as others said, it's also to account for appeals, I guess. I was listening to people talk after the verdict, and in the past, often the jury won't find all of the charges guilty, so prosecution will charge a few relevant to the case. So if the jury couldn't find him guilty without reasonable doubt for a second-degree murder, the hope is they will find him guilty for third-degree murder, etc. So they just bring all possible charges up and hope the jury picks at least one lesser included offense. Just because the jury doesn't think the defendant deserves to be convicted on the worst version of a crime doesn't mean that they think the defendant should be acquitted. The prosecution charges and seeks to prove the elements of all three because they're varying degrees of the crime that fit the facts. The jury rules on them in turn, basically a form. Did the prosecution prove manslaughter 2 beyond a reasonable doubt? If no, acquitted. If yes, convicted, and same questions about murder 3, and so on. So the defendant is ultimately convicted on all three counts, but sentencing proceeds on a variety of factors and generally follows the rules of the worst crime to which there's a conviction. If, as a lot of people thought would happen, the jury found guilty through murder 3, the sentencing would be limited by the murder 3 sentencing statute. Here, Chauvin got convicted on all three charges, but they are a single crime, so the murder 2 sentencing applies. This is also noteworthy on appeal, because Chauvin could get a sentence reduction on the basis of an appeal on one of the elements of murder 2, but still have to serve whatever the resentencing is under murder 3. I want to know as well. Like, I understand how if I get in your face that's assault, if I touch you it's battery, and if I have a weapon there is an armed charge. So if I get in your face and pistol whip you I get 3 charges for one act. But I don't understand how that applies to murder, manslaughter. Like in the other scenario you just did 3 separate illegal things, hence 3 charges. But for Chauvin he just killed him, but also killed him, but also killed him again? I would think it should work where you charge with all degrees, because you don't know what the jury will agree to. But only the most egregious should receive sentencing, otherwise it's like double jeopardy. If you hit and kill someone with a car it's manslaughter. 1 charge. If you can prove intent to kill it's first-degree murder. Another charge. If you can't prove intent to kill but prove it was disregard of human life it's second degree. Another charge. So if second and first degree are appealed later, or if you're not found guilty, well you still gotta serve for manslaughter since ultimately you did hit someone with your car. I'm kinda surprised. I thought they'd nail him for manslaughter and third-degree murder, but I didn't think they'd get second-degree murder to stick. The second-degree murder is an unintentional second-degree murder charge. Minnesota has some weird second-degree murder statutes. I was confused as well until read into it. It's basically a felony murder charge where if someone died while you were committing a felony you can be charged with murder. That makes a lot more sense. I haven't been following the case closely because people have been going absolutely bonkers. When I heard he was charged with second-degree murder I was like, no way. But unintentional murder is still kind of weird. That's what manslaughter is, isn't it? This right here. When you look back on how most other cases against law enforcement have gone, I wasn't expecting the guilty on all charges. I was actually more shocked they reached unanimous decisions. Those other cases didn't have the officers' own police departments throwing them under the bus via testimony. I'm not sure why more people weren't surprised that his own police chief testified against him. The police obviously are trying to make an example of him in hopes that it makes all this talk of police accountability go away for a while. Edit because this is apparently a popular comment. What I mean by throwing him under the bus is that from the perspective of the average police department in which the thin blue line of silence protects corrupt cops and covers up for them more often than it holds them accountable, his police colleagues did the opposite of what they could be expected to do, and instead of protecting Chauvin they, from their perspective, threw him under the bus because they knew that this case was too big and dangerous to sweep under the rug like they normally do. Throwing him under the bus in this case is throwing him to face accountability as he should. And to anyone who thinks I am being too cynical about that, well, all I can say then is that this must be your first police criminal trial. And maybe you should ask his 3 colleagues who watched him commit murder and did nothing whether they think he would have gone to trial if it hadn't been videotaped by a citizen. It was second-degree unintentional murder specifically. I didn't realize that until it was read. The prosecution witnesses are some of the best I've ever seen. The pulmonary expert, Dr. Chauvin, being the best of the lot. The guy is an example of the dream expert witness. Concise, clear, able to explain complex anatomical and physiological stuff in simple layman terms. The others, including the cardiologist and the toxicologist, were great too. Agreed. It took a solid 20 minutes to just go over his credentials and I was already impressed. Especially the award he received from the Mayo Clinic that's given to one doctor, any profession, every 10 years was impressive. I also appreciated the fact that he didn't request to be paid, same with the medical examiner, but the women who basically worked over him for a time. Every paid witness I was just rolling my eyes because they were too extra. I think that the turning of his own department against him in the case is indicative that Chauvin's on-camera case was such a difficult thing to defend that he was to become a sacrificial lamb in a sense. In order to defend the existing police establishment without significant change, they had to make a show of holding an officer accountable for crime. In this sense, I believe Chauvin is being used to diffuse public anger because he would have been a very hard case to justify and the people's discontent was reaching a boiling point. I'd love to hear fellow readers' theories on this. I wouldn't be surprised if their department is much more hostile to people with cameras. Agreed. I think Chauvin was thrown under the bus because they thought that him getting acquitted would have resulted in massive unrest. This doesn't change the fact that I am 100% sure that he is a murderer and that if there had been a good cop and decent human being on the scene that day, George Floyd would still be alive. It's hard not to see it that way even if it's not the case. The most surprising thing was watching his own officers and department turn on him and say everything he did went against the book. Part of me likes to think it was because they realized the blue wall bullshit is over and bad cops need to be held responsible. But the more sensible answer seems to be they knew there was no escaping the public footage and awareness that was out there, so they just let him take the fall in hopes that this makes everything go away. I am extremely surprised. I'll admit, after watching closing arguments and bits and pieces of the trial, I believed the manslaughter charge was likely. It seemed there could be reasonable doubt on the murder charges, and I expected those to be an issue for the jury. I was shocked when both of the murder charges came through. Multiple videos from bystanders. A witness was an off-duty firefighter. A witness was an MMA instructor. Multiple police body and filming the witnesses, showing no mob threat? Law states the suffocation by Chauvin doesn't have to be the leading cause of death, just one of the possibilities. 9 minutes of knee to the neck were multiple videos showing Floyd slowly being less energetic and responsive. I'm not a legal expert, but that seems to be a shitload of evidence. With the fact the witness apparently got sent to Pig's Head, I wasn't surprised the murder charges stuck. Don't get me wrong, he deserves it, but this isn't how it should be done. I'm disappointed in humanity. I thought the video evidence of Chauvin actually kneeling on his shoulders, paired with witnesses saying Chauvin could have actually used more force, would have easily pushed this back to a manslaughter charge. Joe Biden and Maxine have literally wrote the opening statement of his appeal. So this definitely isn't over, as much as we might all want it to be. I disagree. Watching the whole trial, the prosecution did an incredible job eliminating reasonable doubt. The judge in his instructions to the jury was very clear about what constitutes reasonable doubt. It does not mean beyond all possible doubt. Reasonable is a very specific legal term. After watching the defense and the prosecution, it was clearly proven beyond a reasonable doubt in my eyes. But I also admit that I am biased and probably wouldn't have survived jury selection. As a black man living in the States, it makes a huge difference to me, at least. After seeing this happen week after week, after watching George Zimmerman walk free, the idea that we can be killed without consequences really burns into you. Cops know that if they kill a black man, the law will be overwhelmingly on their side. A police officer killed a black man and was brought to justice. It might seem like a small victory to some, but it's different for me. If I'm ever in a situation where my life is in the hands of a police officer, maybe, just maybe, they'll stop and wonder I might not get away with killing this person. It is a small step, and there is definitely more progress to be made, but this was a victory for those of us that are constantly wondering if we'll be the next victim. Keep filming the police people. It was because of Darnell Frazier filming that brought police brutality to the public stage and started many calls for police reform. There also needs to be a call to make body cam videos more accessible to the public. It's ridiculously difficult to obtain police body camera footage of your own arrest. The only reason this case got any attention was because an onlooker filmed the tragedy on her phone. It forced the department's hand, and made them release the police footage, and even that high profile of a case took far too long to do so. What's the point of body cam footage on police when there's miles of red tape to view it? Citizens should be allowed full access to any and all footage whenever they please. Refusing to do so only means there's something to hide. Edit. I was being overly broad in regards to any and all footage. Of course, individual privacy is extremely important, and should be properly worked in. I'm all for police accountability, but when police are handling crisis situations, there's massive privacy concerns with allowing free access to all footage. Just a month ago, I had a cop come into my house to handle a medical emergency. Police see people in psychosis, suicidal behavior, desperation, etc., that they would be mortified to have become public knowledge and that could severely impact their lives or threaten their employment. I coded police crisis calls in an upper-middle-class Minnesota suburb and had to sign multiple confidentiality statements because of how sensitive the things they deal with are. Without video evidence, this would have been another person killed and none of us would know what happened. He deserved to be convicted, but I don't have the same joy and excitement a lot of people seem to have about it. Shitty situation top to bottom, and I don't find anything happy about it. There is no joy in this, nor is there really any hope. There is some sort of relief, like crying silently after things got too hard to keep in. There are thousands more like him in the world, but for one person, there was justice. It was an exhausting battle for it, especially when it was clear that what was done was wrong, and now this one battle has ended, but we're still in a war for change. He was a bad cop and deserved it. Hopefully this will give other bad cops a reason to pause and wonder if they will be the next Chauvin. Might stop them from doing something reckless. Smartphones might be the cause of people not interacting face-to-face, but are a brilliant way of capturing injustices. Just imagine if this happened to Floyd on the side of a remote rural road at night instead. This case doesn't get nearly as much attention. The problem is that police abuse without witnesses already happens. This is why body cams should be standard. It protects the public and honest cops. I only just recently found out the guy's name is Chauvin and thought it was a joke at first. That's a case of nominative determinism. If ever I heard one, chauvinism being the belief in the superiority or dominance of one's own group or people, while others are considered weak, unworthy or inferior, and named after a different guy called Chauvin. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and for more content like this subscribe to Reddit Junkie, and don't forget to ring the notification bell.